we're just doing some introductions on Women Who Code right now. And then give us about 2 more minutes, and then uh, we will begin stuff. All right. So, um, yeah, welcome everybody. So this is an activity, an event that we're doing right now for Women Who Code, Women Who Code Manila here in the Philippines. And what I'm going to be talking about right now is how to use a Zettelkasten. Now, a Zettelkasten acts like a second brain. And for a lot of people that I know who have been trying to use Zettelkasten, they keep on saying it seems so difficult, or it seems like um, it's a bit what do you call this? It seems like yeah, it seems difficult to understand how to actually make Zettelkasten work. And at first, I was a bit confused on how it all worked. Uh, but later on, I was able to get Sonke Aren's book called How to Take Smart Notes. And while I was reading his book, I also decided, hey, there's actually a project right now in Germany that is trying to document how the Zettelkasten worked for the one who created this system. So it's not a methodology, it is a system. Okay? Um, it is a knowledge management system. So I took a look at that as well, and it gave me a lot more insight on how to maintain and use uh, this knowledge management system. So let's start off first with our um, with our slides. Okay. Oh, by the way, before I forget, this is all. This is also recorded or live streamed to YouTube. So if you have any questions, if you have to leave early, it's okay. You can always come back and watch the whole thing all over again. Or if there's something you don't understand, just come back in. Now, the reason why I also created this video is because there were a lot of um, videos that were talking about Zettelkasten, but somehow did not explain it very well. And it took me having to read um, the creator's own essay on how he used Zettelkasten to be able to understand to be able to understand how the whole system works. So this presentation is a product of me using the Zettelkasten. I have ADHD. Well, self-diagnosed ADHD. I have yet to get diagnosed. But um, the thing with most ADHD people is we have a tendency to procrastinate. And at the same time, we have a tendency to be scatterbrained. And we don't know how to put things together in order. Or we have difficulty putting things together in order. And the Zettelkasten, being that it's a second brain, and it is going to be your second brain, the way you put together the Zettelkasten is the way your mind thinks. So you are not conforming to a methodology. You are making a system that conforms to you. Okay? So it's a system that conforms to you. So the objective of this is the way your mind thinks is the way you're able to externalize onto paper or uh, into words for that matter. Okay. Whoops. Sorry. I'm having trouble with. There we go. Now, if you have any questions, for those in YouTube, I'm sorry, um, I will not be able to keep track of the chats there. Okay? We will not be able to keep track of the chats. So maybe someone will, I don't know yet. But if you have any questions, please scan the QR code that you see right now or visit the link Slido, sli.do or slido.com, whichever. You're still going to end up at their site. Enter the code 1539, 15396112. Enter the code 15396112, and you can ask your questions there. Okay? And then at the end of this whole presentation, we'll be able to look through those questions, and hopefully I will be able to answer them. So let's start. Okay? What is a Zettelkasten? Now, before we try to answer what a Zettelkasten is, how did the Zettelkasten first come about? Right? And to do that, we look at the one who created the Zettelkasten, Niklas Luhmann. Okay? So Niklas Luhmann, what he did was, or what he was for that matter. Wait, let me just put up my notes. There we go. So Niklas Luhmann, he was one of the most influential German sociologists of the 20th century. He studied law. He worked in legal clerkship for his town, Lüneburg. And for 8 years, he was also in public administration for the state of Lower Saxony. And at some point in time, uh, he got invited to uh, to work at the University of Bielefeld. Now, when he was invited to work at the university, he did not have a PhD. He didn't even have a master's degree in sociology. And again, remember, he became a very famous German sociologist. Now, during the whole time before he went into the academe, he loved to read. So what happened was, as he read books, he took down notes. And in trying to arrange his notes, in trying to manage his notes, he came up with the Zettelkasten system. Okay? And before he went into the university, because he was going to be teaching there, he needed a PhD, or at the very least, yeah, he needed a PhD. He needed to come up with a publication. Well, two publications for that matter. So the publication is very much like, a dissertation of sorts. The first one was actually a dissertation, and the second one was, if I remember correctly, something that is quite higher than a simple dissertation. Okay? And usually, both of them would each take 2 or 3 years to create. So 6 years to be able to come up with 2 publications. And he did that in 1 to 2 years. And it was all thanks to his Zettelkasten. Okay? So he created all of that in 1 to 2 years. Compare that to what I did here, because I procrastinated a lot. I actually just finished this presentation last night after only 6 hours of trying to figure out how to put together the presentation. Even though Women Who Code has told me that I'm scheduled for this like 2-3 weeks ago. Okay, so that's Niklas Luhmann, and like I said, he created a Zettelkasten. And what exactly is a Zettelkasten? A Zettelkasten is the German word for a slip box. That's exactly what it is. It's just a slip box. What you see there, if you might have seen this in libraries, I don't know if it still exists in libraries. That's a card catalog system, right? Okay, so that is a card catalog system. And that card catalog system allowed Luhmann in 30 years to create 58 books and hundreds of articles, excluding translations. So translations not included. And even after his death, the people who were looking at his system found out that he also had like several other unpublished articles and papers. So a Zettelkasten is a slip box. And for Luhmann, his Zettelkasten, a manual Zettelkasten for that matter, included this card index box, like I said earlier. So included this card index box and an additional 6 beechwood boxes and 3 other individual card index boxes made of reinforced cardboard. All of them have A6 sized sheets of paper, very thin sheets of paper for that matter. And that is where he put his notes. This is an example of one of the notes that he had there. And if you take a good look at it, it's a note about his Zettelkasten. All in all those boxes, he had 90,000 undated slips of paper. Okay. So those 90,000 slips of paper are his research, his thoughts, his ideas, his own questions, okay, his conclusions, all written and stored in this system. So you may wonder, wait, that's huge. That is a very big, that's a very big system. How on earth are you able to find stuff in there? And that's the beauty of this, and that's the beauty of this system right here. It's actually very easy to find what you're looking for. Another thing about the Zettelkasten is, like I said, the way the Zettelkasten, the way the Zettelkasten is formed is pretty much like how your brain works. Your brain does not work linearly. It is not one line. Your brain can jump from topic to topic. You're thinking, especially for someone with ADHD, you're thinking of one thing and all of a sudden you connect it to something else. It seems totally unrelated, but because of one thing that was mentioned, it triggers some other thought process. So kind of like a mind map, but again, it's not a mind map. The way your Zettelkasten works is it orders chaos. A Zettelkasten is ordered chaos. Your notes are never entered in a linear fashion because your thinking is never linear. This allows you to go down a rabbit hole if you wish. So first of all, let us see the parts of your Zettelkasten. First, you have a Zettel. A Zettel is the German word for slip, S-L-I-P. Okay? It's a slip of paper, which you put in the Zettelkasten, which is a slip box. So pretty much, a Zettelkasten is a container for your slips. A Zettel is a slip. Luhmann used to write his notes, again, as I said earlier, on very thin A6 sheets of paper, and then he files it into the slip box. I used to do that, but nowadays what I do is I transferred all my sheets of paper into a digital system. Whether you're going to be using Luhmann's old manual paper-based system or using a digital system like I will be showing later on, it doesn't matter. The concepts, how you save something, how you insert an idea or a note or whatever you learned, they are all the same. The paper version and the digital version, they are just tools, but the structure is still the same. So let's go back to our Zettel. For your Zettel, if you can see there, there's a number there. I think it's 9/8. I think it's 9. Yeah, it looks like a 9. So that's 9/8. So what Luhmann did here was he gave the Zettel, or his note, an ID. And the ID is very important here. It's one of the ways for you, or it's part one on how for you'll be able to get back to this note later on. And then you have there the word Zettelkasten. He's underlined it. It is actually a keyword for him, but at the same time, it acts like a title for the note, a title for the Zettel, a title for the slip. You see a red mark there. That red mark is like putting a number, putting a footnote number. This is a connecting, this denotes that this word is connected to another slip somewhere else, to another zettel somewhere else. And we'll talk about more of that later. And finally, you have the content. One thing you should remember about a zettel or a slip. Every zettel should have one and only one idea. If you're into software programming, especially if you're doing object-oriented programming, you have this one responsibility rule, meaning that this particular function, this particular method, is only supposed to do one thing. And that's the same thing here. The zettel is only supposed to contain one idea, one atomic idea. You do not mix up. This is not an essay. Okay? So this slip of paper is not an essay. Remember, it's an A6 sized sheet, 1/4 of a whole sheet of paper. If you're in the US and you're using the letter size, that's 1/4 of a letter size sheet of paper. All right? So that's your Zettelkasten. It has an ID, it has a title, and it has your content. And the content must only be one idea. Now we go into the types of zettels, your types of notes. The first thing we look at is your fleeting notes. Before I forget, there are actually 5 types of notes here, and this is the first one. Your fleeting notes. So what is a fleeting note? A fleeting note allows you to immediately capture ideas that pop into your head. Whether you're reading something or you are walking in the park, walking in the mall, doing something in the bathroom, especially when you're doing something in the bathroom, something suddenly pops up in your head, and hey, that's actually a good idea. Why didn't I think of that before? So you have to scramble to write it down so that you won't forget. Okay? So these fleeting notes, they are meant to be reminders, so that later on, at the end of the day, or within the next 24 hours, you should be able to process it and then throw away this note. Okay? So fleeting notes, they're temporary. They're not meant to be filed in your Zettelkasten. They are only reminders. So this is an example of what my fleeting note looks like. This is a fleeting note that I took or I wrote down when I was reading How to Take Smart Notes. Okay. Permanent notes should be written in a way that it can still be understood even when the context it was based on have been forgotten. It's long because this is actually how I write my notes down quickly. But this is not, my thoughts here right at that point in time were actually quite muddled. I just wanted to write down whatever was in my head at that point in time before I forget. And as an ADHD person, we easily forget something. Okay? We would think about it in 1 minute, and literally the next 30 seconds, we forget about it. So I have to write it down as fast as possible. You can use anything to capture your thoughts, your moments of your light bulb moments, so to speak, your aha moments. You can have a pen and paper, pen and notebook. You can take out old grocery receipts or whatever and write at the back your thoughts. Or you're in a coffee shop, something comes up, and you write them down on a napkin. That's why we also have what we call as napkin thoughts. Or you can just use your phone, open up an app on your phone and take down a memo, type it there. Or in my case, which is better for me is I do a voice recording of my thought. It's much faster for me. The objective here is that, number one, you put down your idea, you put down your thought at that moment in time as fast as possible for you to process it later on. Okay? And number two, make sure that your notes are not all over the place. It has to be in the same location. All my notes are on receipts, and I put them all in this little plastic Ziploc bag. Sure, do that. Oh, they're all inside my wallet or in my purse. Sure, do that. They're all inside this binder. They're all inside this app on my phone. Sure, do that. As long as everything, all these notes are collated in just one location. If you're reading a book, your tendency when you're studying is you take a highlighter, especially if you're in a physical book, you take a highlighter and you highlight a sentence because that looks interesting. I should remember that. No, you will not remember that. You will not remember that at all. Because imagine that you have, several books, all of them highlighted, and then when you need them, where was that again? They're not all in the same place. And you can also be reading your book and you put a comment on it because, for me to be able to understand this better, I'll just write on the margins. You won't be able to find that anymore, especially when you have a book that's like, good example, university physics, more than 1,000, 2,000 pages, I think, and you're trying to find your note, you're trying to find that thing you highlighted, you'll never find it. If you do, good luck. You'll have difficulty looking for it. No, those are still considered your fleeting notes. Put them down somewhere else. Put them on a piece of paper and then process it later on. Now, the next thing you have is your literature note. We were just talking about, your fleeting notes when you're reading a book by highlighting them and writing comments on the margins. Instead of you doing that, put them on a piece of paper instead. And then later on, within the next 24 to 48 hours, as soon as possible, because that will still be fresh in your mind, you create your literature notes from that. So this was my permanent note. Yeah, this was my fleeting note rather. It was about a permanent note. And you can see that it's a bit long-winded. And then when I saved it to my Zettelkasten, it became like this. Each note should be written in a way that it can still be understood even when the context was based that's supposed to be or, not on. I shall change that later on. Or has been forgotten. Okay. These fields that you see here, most of them are not important. But there are 4 things here that you need. Like I said earlier, all the notes have a title. My timestamp here, this is going to be my ID. So Luhmann has his own way of doing an ID. This is my way of doing an ID. I should figure out where I got this from. So I have a bibliographic reference. We'll show that in a while. And then I have my keywords. The keywords later on, you'll see they are very important. In this case, I put them as hashtags. but Luhmann has it in a different manner. In any case, you need those keywords. You need to figure out what is the context of the note you had just created. In my case, this one, although I remember that when I first read this, this was under the context of a literature note. That's the reason why I have a note type here, literature. But I realized, you know what? This can actually be applied as well to the other type of note, the permanent note. So I'll have these two as my keywords for this slip, for this zettel. Right? Now, I said earlier that your literature note has bibliography. You have to figure out where that note came from. Where did you pick that up in the first place? So you have your bibliography. So the bibliography note contains all the information about the book, about what you're reading. Not necessarily a book. It can be a website even. Okay? So we have your title, Niklas Luhmann's Zettelkasten. I don't know the authors yet. I couldn't find the authors. I couldn't find the year yet on when this was published. Okay? So this is a different book from what you see here. This is from Ahrens. But, example. Publisher, place. I don't have this information, but I have the URL. With Niklas Luhmann, what he did was he had slips of paper and wrote all the information, all the bibliographic information of what he had just read onto that sheet. He gave it an ID, and then he stuck it with, or rather he connected it with the literature note that he created. Now, that's one way of doing it. And the other way, and one thing that I've been using, is using a free app called Zotero. And Zotero can be used on Mac, on Linux, on Windows. This keeps track of all the bibliographic information of whatever I've been reading. And I can connect this with my Zettelkasten. So, if you saw earlier, the permanent note, or rather the literature note that I created, is connected to How to Take Smart Notes by Sonke Ahrens. That's the ID for the bibliographic information. Okay. And you'll see later on that that's exactly the ID that I have as well on my literature note. Type of item, book. Title, author. Place it was published. Who was the publisher? When was it published? How many pages does it have? What is the ISBN information? What is the short title of this book? And so forth. And the nice thing about this is it can handle books. It can handle blogs. It can handle websites. It can even handle, let's say, links to YouTube. It can go from book to website to video streaming and so on and so forth, and it can show it here. And a lot of people in the academe, a lot of non-fiction writers, authors use this a lot because they could figure out later on, oh, okay, I can generate the bibliographic information based on the citation style. Okay? I can generate bibliographic based on the citation style. That way, I do not get accused of plagiarism. So we use this a lot. So let's go back to the slides. So far we have the fleeting notes, we have the literature notes, and we have the bibliography. And like I said earlier, that's my ID. Okay? The Aaron's How to Take Smart 2017, same as what you saw in Zettelkasten. And finally, you have your permanent notes. Now, here's an example of one of my permanent notes. While I was reading How to Take Smart Notes and learning more about Luhmann, a thought came into my mind saying, you know what, maybe Luhmann had ADHD. Because the way he put on things together, it's chaotic, but it's still in order. It's chaotic, but you can still find stuff. Okay? Which is the reason why I decided, I should write that down. ADHD and willpower. Okay? The reason why Luhmann wanted to create this system was because he needed to find a way to be able to record what he learned, what he thought of, without much effort. That's the thing. Most of the time you think, if you're trying to do some study methodology or studying methodology like SQ3R, SQ4R, or doing Cornell notes, you have to put in a lot of effort to be able to create those notes. You have to put in a lot of willpower. And the thing with people with us, ADHD people, we don't have much willpower in our tank. Okay? Very different from people who are neurotypical, who are normal. We don't have that much willpower. I mean, if normal thinkers can do something in 30 minutes continuously, or can do something for 1 hour continuously, we tend to lose focus in about 15 minutes or less. So I thought the note-taking strategy that Luhmann has can possibly be one of the most ADHD-friendly ways of remembering things. It's a tiny slip of paper. You don't have to write, you're not writing an essay, just a few sentences, and that's it. I'm okay with that. I'll be able to remember that again when I read it, because I explained it perfectly, the way I can understand it, and the way I would tell others as well. Okay? So according to Sonke Ahrens, having a meaningful and well-defined task beats willpower every time. If there's one thing the ADHD folks have a tremendous lack of, it is willpower. We have less in the tank than everyone else. Yeah? Something that I said earlier. You're noticing now, if you're trying to figure out right now, what I say is exactly what I wrote. And that's one thing that you should remember when you're taking down notes. When you're taking down notes, write them in your own words. Do not copy-paste. Copy-pasting is useless, because that means you're trying to memorize something. You don't really exactly learn by memorizing. You have to understand what you're reading. Okay? And when you're reading something, or when you're taking down your notes, one thing that I learned from this physicist and lecturer, Richard Feynman, is that when you write something down, write it in such a way that you are teaching someone else. Eli 5, well, in his case, what Feynman did was that write it as if you're teaching a 12-year-old. But for us right now, it's Eli 5. Explain like I'm 5. And that is how you should be writing your notes. You should be writing your notes as if you are talking to someone else. Remember, this is a second brain. Write your notes as if you're talking to someone else, trying to explain to them, trying to teach them what you know. So, the last of the notes that you have there is your keyword index. This is Luhmann's keyword index note. You will notice that in this keyword index, he has your keywords right over here on one side. And next to that keyword are numbers. And these are the ID numbers on the notes that he created. Again, let's take a look. My permanent note has an ID. My literature note has an ID. Whether it's a permanent note or a literature note, you have to remember that you have to give it an ID. You have to give it an identification number in one way or another. I'll show you later on Luhmann's way of doing identification numbers, because if you see here, there's something like 2, 2G, 5D. Okay? And there's some reason for him doing that. I don't do this anymore. Okay? And you'll figure out why later on. But yes, his method was you put an ID on the permanent or the literature note. You go back to your keyword list and you put the ID number, or you put the ID of that note on the keyword where that note is connected to. We're not talking about topics. We're not talking about categorizations. It's just keywords. And that's the beauty of this system. There are no topics. There are no categories. It's just keywords. There may be themes, but those themes are created as clusters of information start to form when you have at least 100 notes in your permanent note system. If you have at least 100 permanent notes already, you start to see, oh, there's this group here that seem to clump together to form one coherent explanation. Okay? So you're not thinking about categories. You're not thinking of topics. It's just keywords per note. And you have to make sure that those notes are connected to a keyword that you could, because without that connection, you will never find that note. So this is the most important part of the system, the ID and the keyword. For me, this is what happens to my hashtags. I have my keywords on one side. My system generates that. The software that I'm using generates that. I just need to remember that I have to put a keyword on the note that I had just created. And then that's it. I will be able to find that by clicking on a keyword. So now, the important stuff. Two things, like I said earlier, you should remember. Number your note, give it an identification, and make sure that you have a keyword attached to it. Again, let's take a look at this. Luhmann's note. This is his way of putting an ID. 1, 1A. Okay. You'll notice that in this note, he does not have a title. I have some notes that do not have a title. It's okay. It's fine. I have some notes wherein I forgot to, add something. forgot to add, let's say, what did I put that earlier? Oh, let's say I forgot a note that would show me um, where this note, if this note is connected to somewhere else. Let's say I forgot that. I forgot to put a theme. I forgot to put a title. I forgot to specify what type of note this is. It's okay. It's fine. It doesn't matter. What matters is I have my ID. In my case, it's the timestamp. You need to have the ID. And in Luhmann's numbering method, this is how he does his ID. Luhmann would begin to have themes, because sociology is a huge topic for that matter. And his whole Zettelkasten is about what he wants to study. And that is, again, about sociology. And as he studied sociology, he realized that, oh, there are different parts or different categories to this. So more or less, not exactly categories, but you get the idea. He started to see clumps of information as he put down his notes. So this denotes the first one, one, okay, one dot, the one to the left of the decimal point, to the left of the dot. That is the ID for his theme. And then the first note under that theme is given an ID of 1, therefore 1.1. Then you have your next note under that theme as well, 1.2. It's a continuation of the note 1.1. Now, sometimes you have notes that you have, ideas, you learn something that is connected to note number 1, or note number 1.1. So you have a new note, 1.1a. And then there's another term on 1.1a that you need to define. So that's a new note, 1.1.a1. Oh, sorry, 1.1a1. And then there's still another term on 1.1a that also needs to be defined. So you have 1.1a2. Or, well, in this case, if you notice the information here, it's not a connection to a term that is here, but more of a connection of the note. So let's say, oh, to be continued on the next slip. And that's where you have it. 1.1b, continuation of whatever you wrote in 1.1a. So this is his way of creating IDs. And the way he files them into his slip box is practically the same thing. He has to go to that point where he saw where 1.1a was, and then inserts that slip in that position. Digitally, you don't have to do that. But I still have to find a way of, connecting one note to another. And then, like as I said earlier, write your notes as if you're teaching someone else. Do not just write notes for yourself. Write it for someone else. This is the reason why people who are now trying to digitize all of the slips of paper of Luhmann found out was that they felt as if Luhmann himself was teaching them as they read and translated every note that is in his slip box, every note that is in his Zettelkasten. Write your notes as if you're teaching someone else. Also, do not modify the content of your notes. It is very possible that what you wrote before turns out not to be true today. Or what you wrote, or you misunderstood something that you had written and you had wrote it down, and now you need to do a correction. Do not modify the note in question. Instead, make a connecting note to whatever you're trying to correct. This is so you can keep a history of your thought process. This is so you could see how your thoughts change over time, how your ideas change over time. Do not modify the original note. Always just put a link to the succeeding note that makes the correction, that updates the information. Before I forget, one more thing. Actually, I forgot this earlier. Let's go back to literature notes. I said earlier that one of the things that we like to do is we highlight information, or we highlight sentences in the book, right? And then sometimes we come upon something that we like, or that we really like. We come upon a quote. I have several quotes on my Zettelkasten. I'll show you later. But yeah, sometimes you come across a quote, and you want to take note of that. I mean, you want to take note of that. But before you try to write down that quote, and put it in your literature notes, you also have to write down, why do you like the quote? Why does this quote resonate to you? Don't just say, oh, because I like the quote. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you write down the quote because it is informative to you. Okay? You write down the quote because it is informative to you. You write down the quote and then attach the corresponding idea behind that. Why would you want to copy-paste that into your Zettelkasten? I'm not saying that you should not list down quotes. No, because some quotes are really something like, oh, I would like to insert this, or I would like to put this in my mind. But you also have to write down why you want to put it down, why you want to record what that person just said on the book. Don't just write it. Here's an example under my permanent notes. I don't remember what book this came from. Well, of course I do remember, sorry. According to Sonke Arendts, having a meaningful and well-defined task beats willpower every time. This is a quote from his book. But I also put in an explanation, why does this resonate with me? Because of this. You can copy quotes into your Zettelkasten, but please remember to also write down why you like that quote. Give an explanation of why that quote is important to you. So, Let's now go into the workflow. Step 1, you take down your fleeting notes. Write down fleeting notes. You don't always have to write it down if everything that's in your head is well processed already. If it's already well processed, then you can just head on down to your literature note or your permanent note. But most of the time, what you have in your mind is all in a jumble. So write it down. Write down whatever is there. Process it later. Process it at the end of the day. Process it tomorrow. But don't let it go too long that you have forgotten why you wrote down what you wrote. Like I said, process them as soon as possible. If you're reading a book, first thing you have to do is record the bibliographic details. Before you start anything, before you start going down that rabbit hole, write the details about your book. Write the details about that website. Write the details about that YouTube link. Add keywords and identification number to every permanent and literature note you create. And find connections to other notes. Okay? That is also important. You have to, you're about to put something and then say, I realized that this note is kind of the same as something I wrote some time ago. Where did I find that? Where did I put that? Oh, it's under the same keyword as the one that I have on the current note. If they turn out to be connected, then on the index card itself or on the slip itself, also note that, or also put there that this is connected to somewhere else. Remember what, no, not this one. Remember what Luhmann did here in the Zettel example that we have. That red mark there, okay? The red mark, that's actually a number. A number to another note that, like a footnote, as I said earlier. Okay? So not only does he put this number, not only does he put this ID number on the Zettel and connect it to a keyword, he looks for other notes in his slip box, and if he finds a connection between two slips, he makes each of them point to each other. Again, like a footnote number. There's a forward link and there is a backward link. So whatever this card, whatever this ID is pointing to, that slip also has this number 9/8 in red. So there's a forward link and there's a backward link. That's always important. Make connections between notes. Oops, sorry. Find connections to other notes, and then that's the time you start finding the note. Let me just show you what my system looks like. So this software that I'm using, this is called Obsidian. Again, this is a free software that allows you to do knowledge management. It is similar to Notion. If you are familiar with Notion, this is the desktop version, offline version of Notion, right? But you could use Obsidian in any way you want to. I have used it to create my Zettelkasten. So I have a template here. This should allow me to say that every Zettelkasten, or every Zettel that I create will always have these fields: a note type, a theme, a title, a timestamp, the reference, the keywords, and so forth. These three folders that you see here, these are similar to the folders or to the boxes that that Luhmann used. There is one for references. There is one for the literature that he takes down from those references that he's read. And there is another, which is his, what he calls his main slip box. The main slip box contains his own ideas. If you take a look at my reference for, let's say, this one. This is my reference for Arendt's, How to Take Smart Notes, similar to the one that I have for Zotero. So I wrote it all down here so that it's easier for me to go back to when I need to. But just in case, it also says here where to find it if I am going back to my Zotero app, right? This has a backlink. Notice that I don't have any links here, but I have a lot of literature notes here that use this. So this is where it shows up. This is a backlink. It allows me to see immediately what notes did I create when I was reading this book. It doesn't have any forward links because, like I said, this doesn't have links right now. Okay. This is my ID. I'm not using Luhmann's version of creating an ID. Instead, I am using timestamps: year, month, day, hour, minute. All right. So I modified this note only for this. But this is the original. Okay. I have here, see also 2022-08-625. I don't remember what I wrote for that, but let's see. Oh, right. This is connected to my note that is inside my permanent note. If you notice, I haven't edited this yet. This is an older note. Okay. This is a newer version. But it doesn't matter because I have my timestamp, I have my ID, and I have my keywords. Okay. So like I said, it doesn't matter if you forget this, you forget reference or whatever else. Doesn't matter that I do not have this new field. But this is important. These two are important. And then later on, I can look at my tag pane and see what tags do I have here. Now, this is my Zettelkasten. This is the digital version of Luhmann's Zettelkasten with some modern ways of putting an ID onto it. If you'll notice that sometimes there is, let me see if I can find one of those things. See? This would allow me to see that the continuation of this note is on another note. There we go. I do not need to put them in order. It doesn't matter. What matters is I'm able to link them properly. In fact, in this case, I even forget that I should have put a previous link here. Where did this come from? But it's fine because I have my backlinks. Okay? But again, important thing is you have your ID and you have your keywords. Now, the last part. So you've made a lot of notes now. Now you can create your presentation. Now, if you notice, oops, sorry. If you notice, I have been writing this down since May. Well, it says here it says here that it was last created on August 11. But remember, I was using a paper version of my Zettelkasten before I decided I should move this into Obsidian instead because it's getting a bit large and I needed a more mobile way of. I can't bring the whole box if I wanted to. Okay? This is more travel friendly. So I've created this since May of 2022. I started this around May 2022. And I think I remember Clau asking me to create this presentation sometime, what is it, August, sometime July. Okay. And if you also notice, it's an on again, off again thing. May, and then all of a sudden, it's not in order. It's all of a sudden in June, and then I go back and then do July, and so forth. And then sometime when I was nearing the point wherein I'm supposed to make this presentation already, you'll notice now it's like, all of a sudden I'm reading a lot, trying to keep up. But yeah, I have my notes, and I have my main here, my permanent notes, things that I thought of. So how do I put them as a project? How did I make this presentation? Well, the first thing I did was I took a look at my tags. I have some idea of what I wanted, but okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to define what a Zettelkasten is. Now, I know that I defined it somewhere and gave it a tag of Zettelkasten, so I look into that and start going through each and every note that is connected to that keyword. Labeling a note is probably the hardest things to do, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look, I have recently changed my stance on requiring titles for notes. This is me modifying, this is me changing my mind, but not modifying the old note. I no longer label my notes on Obsidian. Instead, the titles are optional. What is important for me, though, is to be able to find the note via the keyword. Okay, so that's one example. But do I want to put this as part of my presentation? Maybe not. No. So I try to look for something. Having an idea on its own card allows you to edit what is important. If you have a topic that feels like there's so much to say in an amount of time, the slip box would allow you to quickly put together the ideas that matter to your presentation. Possible, but no, I'm not going to use that. So I'll go down, okay, trying to find out where I could, where my definition is. And then I came across this one. Luhmann's Zettelkasten consisted of a card index box, blah, blah, blah. You know what? I should talk about Luhmann. Yeah, because that's the only way to say how to explain what a Zettelkasten is. Introduce Luhmann himself. So, okay, I am going to look for everyone that is Luhmann. And as I'm trying to look for the notes that would fit, I eventually do, and this is what happens. These are my notes. And if you look at it, it almost reads like a manuscript. This is the one that I've been following while I've been doing this presentation, while I've been talking about the presentation. There are some things that I skipped, but it doesn't matter. Everything that I need is already here. And sometimes there's something that isn't there in my notes that I suddenly remember, and I insert it into the project, into the manuscript, into the presentation. Okay? So if you're trying to create a presentation, you must already know something about what you're going to talk about. And you already have ideas about it from the very start. Okay? The mind map is nice if it's there and you have to create it and you don't have a Zettelkasten. But the thing about the mind map is that's just for this project. That's just for this particular activity. And then that's it. But the Zettelkasten, by looking at everything here, you begin to wonder, oh wait, I did write something about, work ethics with regards to thinking or learning. Is that, do I need to put this there? No, that's not part of it. It's okay. This was not part of any of my notes, but I know it's important, so I put it there. Again, this is your thinking partner. The Zettelkasten is your thinking partner. And by reading again through all these notes that you've created, sometimes you get to suddenly realize that, oh wait, I forgot to put something here. I just suddenly remembered something that is related to the project that I'm trying to create. And you would insert that as needed. Like this one. And pretty much that's it. That is how my Zettelkasten works for me when I was creating this presentation. In terms of coming up with ideas, sometimes you create a link. Where is that? I think it's under fleeting notes. But anyway, sometimes you create a keyword that connects two notes together, even though those notes are not in the same field of thought. It's pretty much like like when you were like when the first computer was being thought of or was being created. The first computerized machine had nothing to do with mathematics and had everything to do with knitting. Knit and purl. So when they created a knitting machine, that's all it had, knit and purl. And with just those two things, with just those two types of stitches, you can make a lot of patterns. And then someone decided, you know what? Why not put knit and purl as zeros and ones and start to create a computing machine? Two very different very different fields of thought, but because of how it works, they were able to come up with something new. And that is how your Zettelkasten is supposed to work. Those keywords are important because as you decide, oh, that I want to see all the notes that I put as my under this particular keyword, and then sometimes you make a discovery that is so out of the blue but makes sense, all because they have something in common. This is what your Zettelkasten is supposed to. This is what the Zettelkasten is supposed to do for you. So with that, so with that, we are now open for questions. Again, if you have any questions, you can go here, or maybe there are questions right now on Discord. You could say them because I am not looking at the chats right now. Hazel?
Yes po.
May questions ba on your side?
Wala po. Wala po.
Wala?
So,
Okay. So, Christine, do you have any questions about the note-taking, the way that note-taking is done using the Zettelkasten system? Is Christine still there? I don't know if Christine and Sheila are still on.
si Sheila po, may question po siya. Doon niya tinype sa random
Sige,
hangout
what's the question? Sige, what's the
chat.
question?
What's the difference between literature and permanent note?
Okay. So, like I said earlier, when you say literature note, this is something that you learned from reading something else. It always has a reference. Um, if you're reading a book, if you're reading a website, if you're listening to something on YouTube, and if you're listening to a seminar, listening to a seminar, that is also considered as a literature note because you need to also put you need to also record where did you get this information from. Okay? That's the thing about the literature note. It always has an origin. Where did it come from? Okay. But with the permanent note, these are things that you thought of because of because of several other things that you have read. Okay? So let's say if in most of my permanent notes, in my case, in most of the permanent notes that I have, and all of the permanent notes that I have, what happens is reading something on the book triggers a very different idea in my head on how I could understand what I just read better. So it may have a connection to the book, but the way I understand it does not come from the book at all. So that's how some of my items in the permanent in my permanent folder are. No? Not all of them, or yeah, all of them are light bulb moments. It's not written in the book, but it is still related. So I put it in. So you'll also notice in the system, or in the Obsidian, uh, in my Zettelkasten earlier, I had one note that is connected as a literature note, but there's another note connected to it as well, to that same literature note, but it is a permanent note because this is my idea. This is not the idea that is written in the book. Okay? This is not what is written in the book. This is my own. So it becomes a permanent note. Did I answer that question? Or was that understandable, rather?
Yes po, thank you.
All right. You're welcome. So, any other questions?
I think si Christine po nagtatype.
Yep, yep. We can wait. That is also another wonderful thing about having notes. If you noticed my project on my Obsidian project, or rather my project notes for that matter. If you noticed, um, because all my previous thoughts are already there, I could read it as is and figure out if I'm going over time. This is the first time that I have not gone overtime on a seminar or on the talk. Okay, and yeah, I still owe it. I owe all of that to my Zettelkasten right now. My timing is actually spot on.
Yeah, may question po si Christine.
Mm-hmm.
When to delete fleeting notes?
You always delete fleeting notes. They're temporary. They're not supposed to. They are supposed to be processed. You write it down, you process it into either literature or permanent notes, and then you throw it away. There is never a time that you should be saving a fleeting note as is. It's always thrown away. Kaya nga, that's why it's called fleeting. They're only there for you to remind yourself, oh, okay, I should write about this later. If you're if you're into journaling, you should have an idea like, oh, something happened to me today. I should write this down later in my journal. Let me just put a to do. You can liken it to a to do, actually. Let me just put a reminder on my phone that, hey, this happened today. I will process what happened. I will process what happened to me in my journal later. And since you put that in your phone, for example, once you get home, once you sit down, you start to journal, then you delete that reminder from your phone because the fleeting note has done its job. And what you really want to record is in your journal. Other questions? Anyone else? Anything else? I guess that's it. Meron pa ba? Is there anything else? Is there other questions? No more? Yeah, I guess that's it. No? Because there's no one else. There's no one at Slido as well. No one's asking anything on Slido. Otherwise, it would show up. So I guess, yeah, that ends my presentation for today. Okay. So um, thank you so much for being here. I hope that all helps. It helps all of you with um, with how Zettelkasten works and how in this particular presentation, how to create a presentation for your talk. Okay, especially and I hope this is helpful, especially if you decide that, oh, I want to, you know, give give a talk, or you want to submit for a call for presentations uh, for CFP. And if you start creating the Zettelkasten now, then you could use it later on when you're feeling when you have the well, hopefully this will help you also be able to give presentations or talks or papers or reports in your work or whatever else. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you po.